Most people just follow Apple because of their products. But every now and again, we pay attention to what's happening in and around the C-suite. Tim Cook has been CEO at Apple for 14 years, presiding over one of the most successful companies in the world, including being the first company in the world to achieve a market cap of $1 trillion. But over the last couple of months, several notable figures have retired or left the company to join other tech companies. So is there trouble in paradise, or is it something else? I'm Mike. I've got 25 years of background from pharma tech and consulting. I have degrees in business, human resources, and psychology. I have held C-level roles in international companies. And on this channel, I take a look at why companies do the things they do, and I provide advice on navigating the corporate world. This time, it's about Apple and the recent seemingly slew of senior executives leaving. So, might as well get stuck in. For those of you that don't know, Apple was founded in 1976 by Steve Jobs, Steve Wozniak, and Ronald Wayne. They were one of the first companies in the world to market personal computers, and notably with the introduction of the Macintosh in 1984, Apple were behind the expansion of the concept of the graphical user interfaces to consumers. Apple wasn't always the monumental success story that it is seen as today. They had power struggles. The departure of Steve Jobs in 1985 led to an extended period of, if not decline, then at least massive drift. Microsoft dominated the personal computer space with their operating system, and close to 1996, Apple was almost declared bankrupt. In 1996, they had over $1 billion in losses, and they laid off large groups of employees. In 1997, Microsoft threw Apple a lifeline, and Steve Jobs returned to the company. Jobs got to work quickly and did what a lot of turnaround CEOs do. He cut down on the size of the product lines. He refocused the company on making a few core high-quality products. And 2001 was the year of the iPod and iTunes, which was not just a product, but a focus more broadly on consumer electronics and less so on personal computing. In 2007, they launched the iPhone. Nokia, at the time the dominant player in the mobile phone market, was ultimately destroyed by the iPhone and similar competitor products. But the iPhone wasn't just about the phone. It was about the Apple ecosystem, a platform of software and services and physical products that all integrated and communicated well with each other. For the customer, it meant the appearance of a seamless tech and digital experience where more and more things could link and work together. Apple wasn't just making money on tech anymore. They were making money on App Store purchases, customers locking into the ecosystem and generating recurring revenue. And in 2011, Steve Jobs' death led to the CEO, Tim Cook, taking over. What is partially forgotten today is that not everybody was sold on Tim Cook at the time. Taking over from the visionary Steve Jobs was something most people saw as a tall order. Tim Cook was basically this boring supply chain kind of guy whose focus had been on operations and operational excellence. And in truth, Tim Cook didn't live up to the legacy of Steve Jobs. He is and was nowhere near the product visionary that Steve Jobs was, but he was something else. He was and is very, very good at building a company that could build good products and scale and make those products incredibly profitable. I remember the time before Tim Cook. It was common to not be able to get any Apple product on the first day of release. Today, you don't need to stand in line, and barring maybe one or two marquee products, they are always available. They always work, and the experience of buying an Apple product is just seamless. Under Tim Cook, the amount of money made on other things than phones grew massively. They make money on non-physical products, services became a huge part of the business, and the margins of those far outstripped most physical product margins. Apple has also reduced their dependence on the iPhone. They introduced AirPods, Apple Watches, Apple Music, and other products, all of them there to supplement income, but also to reduce risk related to a more and more saturated phone market. People were starting to upgrade their phones at a much slower pace, and finding new ways to generate revenue has become important to Apple. Tim Cook and Apple also invested massively in their own silicon, and today, with the exception of graphics-intensive gaming, Apple Silicon regularly trances Intel and AMD-based computing platforms in terms of pure processing power and power efficiency. Apple today is at a market cap of over $4 trillion. They are only surpassed by NVIDIA. They are class leading in phones, they are dominant in wearables and the iOS ecosystem. They have hugely competitive personal computers now. And if they do have one major weakness, it's a significant underperformance in AI. Apple Intelligence is nowhere near as powerful, useful, or in use as ChatGPT, Google Gemini, or even Microsoft Copilot for that matter. Apple Intelligence just isn't that good. Mine is a still relatively small and humble channel, but I'm trying to grow it as much as possible. So if you're new here, I hope you show a little support by clicking the subscribe button. It would make a huge difference. Thanks a ton. Depending on how you count executives, not all of these people reported directly to Tim Cook, but 9 notable executives have left Apple recently. Jeff Williams, Chief Operating Officer, John Giannandrea, the SVP of AI and Machine Learning, Alan Dye, Head of UI, Qi Yang, Head of AI, Bob Walker, who was a Senior AI Executive, Ruoming Pan, who is a Head of AI Foundational Models Team, Kate Adams, General Counsel, Luca Maestri, who moved from CFO to Corporate Services, and then Lisa Jackson, who is a VP of Environment, Policy, and Social Initiatives. That's a lot of people in a short period of time. All of these changes are not a sign of chaos. They, as far as I can tell, are a sign of something else. Tim Cook is leaving soon, and he's cleaning house before the new guy starts. Tim Cook has been CEO for 14 years. He's 61 years old. He's overseen a period of unprecedented growth and success, and now it's time for him to hand over the reins to the next guy. The things happening are, I think, a confluence of a few unfortunate exits, but most are planned cleanups before the new person steps in. One of the things that a lot of companies get wrong when it comes to succession planning is leaving all the problems for the next person to solve. The CEO checking out and kind of thinking that's a problem for the next guy and that person should set their own team is not an uncommon practice, despite it being pretty much a consistently bad approach. The fact is, the CEO is only as good as the team around them, and the team around them and their effectiveness are highly linked to how well they work, align, and support the CEO. And one of the biggest problems a new CEO often has to deal with is the mix of former colleagues who are now unhappy with not having been chosen as the new CEO, and others whose loyalties, affinities, priorities aligned with the outgoing CEO's way of thinking. To put it simply, if you're the starting quarterback on a team, you are in part the star because the other players on the team have learned to adapt their playstyle to your playstyle and tactics. When a new quarterback steps in, it's not a given that that team does as well, in part because the team is used to playing around the strengths and weaknesses of the old quarterback. So what you sometimes see is a quarterback replacement being followed by changes to other key positions. You see this in football as well, where an entire team is built around 1 or 2 key players. And when they leave, the entire team needs remodeling. In a corporate setting, leaving this reshaping of the team to the new guy often leads to infighting, open conflict, and sort of damaging corporate boardroom behaviors that hurt the company. The smart thing to do is not leave all of it to the next guy. They get to set their team, but you want the people that are going to be a challenge out beforehand. You want the old guy, the outgoing guy to, do the dirty laundry. So there are basically 3 buckets we could put these 9 levers into. They are those that were retired for continuity. There's a couple that were fired for low performance, and then there was some competitive poaching. Jeff Williams had been at Apple for 27 years. I read at some point that he had been pitched as a successor to Tim Cook, but given his age, I don't think that was ever really in the cards. He's only 3-ish years younger than Tim, and the likelihood of being first or in front of the succession line was going to be low for that reason alone. On top of that, Apple's future is not dependent on the performance of the operational part of the business, not anymore at least. There's one thing that is incredibly robust. It's the core operations of Apple. Handing that role over to a younger, newer guy breaks some of the Tim Cook loyalty, and it puts in a new, in the executive level, individual who in his executive career is just starting out, and he's not going to be chasing for the CEO role just yet. Basically, Sadiq Khan at 59 is not a spring chicken, but he's a safe pair of hands for a part of the company that's doing fine. John Giannandrea, he was fired. Siri is still not great. Apple AI is at best lackluster. And how do I know or think he's fired? Well, the tell is in how his seeming retirement was executed. He was linked and stated as retiring in 2026, but he was removed from the executive page almost immediately. Yeah, to me, this was one of those deals where he got a pile of money to pretend he wasn't fired and could leave with relative dignity and not make too much noise on the way out of the door. It's a reflection of Apple's relative weakness within AI and software. And considering their track record, somebody had to pay the price, and John was the guy to pay. Alan Dye was poached by Meta, and on the surface, this seems like a relatively big negative, but it might not be. He was a key person in the boardroom and important to Apple in many ways, but it's not like it was entirely viewed as a negative. Steve LeMay, another longtime Apple insider, is taking over from him. And from what you can see from rumor forums and internal forums and stuff like that, it seems like at least pockets of Apple are happy with the other guy leaving. The reason is Steve LeMay is seen as stronger in terms of UI, and there has been both internal and external criticism of some of the UI decisions made under Alan Dye. I don't have a strong opinion on liquid glass, but you can Google it. Trust me, there's a lot of stuff out there about that stuff. Kate Adams, Lisa Jackson are all planned retirements. Luca Maestri was an internal relocation. None of those three people were ever going to succeed Tim Cook as CEO. Kate and Lisa, although important to the company, ran parts of the business that are not exactly central to the product. Bringing in new blood from below and diluting some of the loyalties to Tim Cook are a good thing at this point. And again, to put it in simple terms, it accomplishes two things potentially. The new people are, to some extent, just going to be happy to be promoted to the starting lineup. Their sights are not set on becoming CEO just yet, so their openness to aligning with the new CEO's vision is bigger than someone who has been entrenched in the role for 5, 10, or 15 years. Also, they're not settled into team dynamics. It's all things being equal, going to be easier for the new guy to shape the needs of the team because internal roles and dynamics haven't fully crystallized yet. The same goes for the switch of the CFO. If there's one role that often becomes the right hand of the CEO, it's the CFO. They are typically at the center of power in the C-suite. They are typically incredibly closely aligned. Sometimes they are flanked by the COO. Either way, though, they are almost always the strongest power axis. The CFO supports and sometimes makes the difficult decisions so the CEO doesn't stand alone with tough calls. Again, transitioning Luca out and bringing Kevin Perek in allows for a resetting of that dynamic. A too strong CFO could challenge an incoming CEO in an unhelpful way. So resetting the playing field is usually a smart move. Finally, you've got Ruo Mingpang, Bobby Walker, and Qi Yang. Not all necessarily in the C-suite, but these are notable exits, and they speak to something that is at least seen as a clear challenge for Apple. AI is what all tech firms see as the future, and there's this spending spree at tech firms to steal the best and brightest from competitors. These individuals likely left because of the promise of a bigger paycheck, a chance to work at a company where AI was more central to the strategy and had more potential, and a feeling that Apple was falling behind. Some mix of the three. Are things a disaster over at Apple's AI teams? Probably not, but my guess is this is the area where they are most challenged. I also don't think it's necessarily central to their strategy. All in all, though, what you've got is a list of levers that to me clearly signal mainly an orderly and structured reshaping of the team in preparation for Tim Cook stepping down. That and some AI people leaving because Apple, in fairness, doesn't have their SH1T together when it comes to AI. But for now, being in AI isn't immediately going to cost Apple anything in terms of success. For them, it's a supplementary thing, but it could be a problem down the road. So who replaces Tim Cook? First of all, it's none of the people that have recently stepped in. So not the new CFO, not the new head of operations, it's not the new legal counsel or anybody from the people and culture function. I'd even guess that the head of people also leaves prior to the new person stepping in or being replaced as part of the new person's potential leadership reshuffle. People and culture leads tend to follow the CEO. When the CEO goes, the people and culture lead tends to follow as well. There's just a lot of chemistry there that is hard to recreate. Plus, opinions on people and culture topics are typically quite strong. So replacing a people and culture lead to align with the new guy's needs and priorities is not out of the question. I also don't see the senior vice president of worldwide marketing taking the role. He could in theory, but this is down to at least my assessment of what I think Apple needs right now. And what they don't need is even more emphasis on marketing. The marketing side, like the operations side, works. It's powerful and it's not key to future success. The future of Apple hinges on the product, and that basically leaves three options. John Ternus, the SVP of Hardware Engineering, John Srouji, who is SVP of Hardware Technologies, and Craig Federighi, SVP of Software Engineering. All three guys have been at Apple for a long time. All three guys oversee key parts of Apple's business. If there's one area where they are struggling, the consensus would be on the software side, broadly speaking. Ask any tech YouTuber or just an Apple user, and you're likely to find a significant number of people that will find fault with their operating systems, their UIs, and of course, their AI area is also anemic in terms of success. This is where they are, relatively speaking, at their weakest. So choosing Craig Federighi would signal a couple of things. It would signal that software is at the core of their business, and it is what is going to lead Apple into the next stage of growth. It would signal that AI is at the core of what they need to achieve in the coming years, and that monumental effort needs to be put in to upgrade this area, to lift this area, to fix this area. That would be a perfectly reasonable and feasible rationale. The reason I don't think it would be him is because A, Apple has never exactly been software first. Their software is well liked, but it's always been about the hardware. And B, you don't promote the guy in charge of the area that's struggling and has the biggest challenges. This team is the one dealing with the AI exodus. This is the team that has the problems with the UI. That means there's a brain drain in this area. They are already behind the curve, and lifting Craig up would mean needing to lift a whole lot of other people up below him, some of whom have newly been lifted. All these things put together make for the rationale of giving the job to Craig weak. He's the least likely of the three and needs to focus on fixing what needs fixing first. That leaves Srouji and Ternus. The case for Srouji. A while ago, I did a video on how to get promoted. And one of the things I said about getting promoted at an executive level is being known for a success. Now, both Srouji and Ternus are seen as successful executives at Apple. Srouji is essentially the guy behind all the guts of Apple's products. Those absolutely dominant silicon wafers that make up the M3 and M4 and M5 processors are a product of Srouji's work. He's associated with that success, and it's a level of dominance technologically in personal computing and portable devices, which is really impressive. He's an incredibly strong candidate. He's also respected throughout the business for his results and his leadership. He's an engineer in mindset, and that does make him a tough customer. He's not a soft and fluffy leader and is known for getting results. Ternus, on the other hand, is associated with the products as a whole. Putting all those individual pieces together into a cohesive product, that's him. Those incredibly popular products, many of which completely dominate their sectors, originate from his team. Obviously in collaboration, but the product is him. So also, he is associated with success. Ternus is reported to have a more emotionally intelligent leadership style than Srouji. He's also still technically highly competent. He comes across as more soft-spoken than Srouji. He's reportedly a better coalition builder. And in general, what I've seen of him on conferences and in product launches, he's just a stronger communicator than Srouji. Style-wise, from the outside, he comes across to me as more similar to Tim Cook, where Srouji seems to be a little bit more on the hard-hitting side. Now, for a long time, media thought Srouji was the front runner. But in recent months, this has changed. Ternus has been consistently tipped as the front runner to take over from Tim Cook. But why him over Srouji? Basically, I think it comes down to four things. Style. Although not the primary consideration, my guess would be that the leadership style that works for Srouji might be a little bit too technocratic to be able to embrace the entirety of Apple. The more technical, hardcore results persona that he has just doesn't speak as well to the more creative souls at Apple, the marketing people, and those kind of people. The transition would be tougher compared to Ternus and it would be more amenable to Ternus's soft-spoken style. Ternus just comes across also as a little easier to follow. And for a company of this size, it's a consideration. You put the CEO in that you think is the right fit. But if you worry that the CEO has a style that would provoke exits due to clashes of style, you at least consider that risk. And Ternus doesn't have that risk associated with him. At least it doesn't seem that way to me. Media? He's got a more positive media persona. He's likable. He's a very strong communicator. In a company with the exposure levels of Apple, you just need someone that is strong on this. Then he has the product. AI for Apple is not about competing with ChatGPT or Gemini. AI for Apple is right now about integrating it into their own products and not creating a standalone AI product. Likewise, Apple's silicon is not being built, not to my knowledge at least, with the intent of turning Apple into a chip manufacturer for other industry players. The silicon is for themselves and not for an emerging B2B business. It would be interesting though. No. The foundation of Apple has always been the product, and Ternus would be a sign that the product comes into even more focus. It would just align really, really well. Fourth, a little bit subjective, but Tim Cook and Ternus just come across as really similar, and I'm fairly confident that there's some level of affinity bias. Tim just likes Ternus. Seems that way at least. The broader media probably has it right. Ternus is the front runner. This definitely gives Tim Cook a headache about how to retain Srouji. Again, media have reported that there's a chief technology officer title in the cards for him. But what would that mean? Well, probably a reshuffling of departments to give him a greater span of control. Whether you include software or AI in that remit would be an interesting consideration. You could potentially see the current senior executive team of 10 people being shrunk a little to concentrate the decision-making power around a core of a COO, a CTO, a chief product officer, a CFO, a CEO, and a CMO. But with a company of this size, a too small management team will also have its challenges. And Tim Cook, what happens to him? He becomes chairman of the board. He steps away from the day-to-day, but he stays connected to the company. That would calm any nervous markets. He would probably refocus on external stakeholder management. I'd expect him to be having phone calls with the President of the United States on occasion and also having chats with high-profile regulators as well. His job would be to make life a little bit easier for Ternus on the external front initially, but leave the internals to Ternus himself. Like I also said in a previous video, the old CEO always needs to get out of the way of the new guy. Otherwise, things are bound to go wrong. So, yes, there is a shakeup underway at Apple. And yes, I do think Tim is preparing his exit. But he is preparing. It's not an exodus. The AI thing is concerning, but less so than outsiders would have you think. This is about methodically putting the pieces into place to prepare for a stable handover of one of the most valuable companies in the world. And then the question comes, who would you pick? Share your thoughts in the comments. Subscribe. See you soon.